2010 was the year I bought my first acoustic guitar. It wasn't the first time I had acoustic guitar kind of in my possession, however. When I was 16-ish, my neighbor had lent me her parents' acoustic that they rarely, if ever, played. I'm pretty sure without asking them, actually. I've never really been a gentle player, and I accidentally broke the E string on it. After replacing the string, she snuck it back into their house, and to this day, I doubt they really noticed it was even gone. Even before that, when I was 12-ish years old, my cousin's boyfriend worked at Long & McQuaid, kind of the Canada version of Guitar Center. He played in a band called Zen Bungalow and was cool enough to rent me a guitar. It was a Yamaha full-size acoustic. At 12 years old, I was hardly anywhere near a full-sized person yet. Arguably, I'm still not today either. Nonetheless, when I sat with the proportionally massive guitar on my knee, I couldn't really reach the strings with my right arm properly. I decided to put the guitar on the floor, kneeled beside it, and tried to form the chords by contorting my wrist at almost a 180-degree angle. It wasn't quite what I envisioned rocking out would be like, and after a few months, my mother took it back to Long & McQuaid, declaring to her relief, I didn't really have an interest in the guitar after all. The year when I bought my first acoustic was also the year I started my solo act. Coincidence? I think not. Briefly debating to try the Gregular Stomp Show on my Gibson SG electric guitar, I quickly decided acoustic would fit the demeanor of the act a lot better. But what to buy? Maybe it was just me, but the brand of guitar one played was very important, at least at the time. It seemed to help define your identity of what kind of a player you were. If you were a Strat player, you were probably super into solos. If you played an SG, you were probably great at palm muting and in a hardcore band. If you played an Ibanez, you were probably either really good at guitar or terrible at it. The Gibson acoustics were definitely out of my price range, so doubtful I was going to continue my loyalty to them. As I scanned my memories, trying to think of an acoustic that I had heard before that sounded rad, I landed on a band called Days of Anew. I'm pretty sure they only really had one big hit. It was the song with the part. They played Winnipeg around 2010 at a bar called The Zoo, and I did sound for them that night. I can't say I was an instant fan of their band or anything like that. The singer's vocals were reminiscent of early Stone Temple Pilots and Pearl Jam, the vocal style that was still sort of popular at the time. Not really what I was into. But his acoustic sounded awesome. As they were setting up, the stage was littered with Taylor guitars. I think he said he was sponsored or something like that. It was like being at my own little guitar fashion show. I'm not quite sure what drew me to Taylor guitars. They just kind of seemed to be the ones I wanted to play. During my next trip to L&M, I think I might have played a few other guitars, but after about 15 minutes playing the Taylor 110E, I was ready to take it home. The tone was kind of scooped, like a metal tone, rich and low end and a crispy top end, but vague mid-range that would probably hide my mistakes when I played. But when did Taylor start? It kind of seemed to come out of nowhere. I mean, at least from the perspective of someone in Winnipeg. Or did it? Taylor Guitars is a guitar manufacturer based in El Cajon, California, and has been named by highconsumption.com as one of the 12 best guitar manufacturers in the world. I would probably actually have a hard time trying to name 12 different guitar brands now that I think about it. Anyways, Taylor Guitars specialize in acoustic and semi-hollow body electrics, although they did put out several solid body guitars like the Taylor Classic Solid Body in 2007-ish and the SB1 around the same time. David Hosler, one of their senior product developers, had a breakthrough in the pickup department around the mid-2000s, and Bob Taylor himself agreed the new design was destined for a solid body as opposed to the semi-body. Ultimately, the solid bodies didn't really take off, and Taylor just kind of stuck to what they were good at. Speaking of Bob T, Taylor Guitars was founded by him in 1974 with the help of Kurt Listug and Steve Schemmer. A few years prior to that, in 1972, an 18-year-old Bob Taylor began working at American Dream, a guitar-making shop owned by Sam Radding. Kurt and Steve were already employed there at that point, which I believe is where the three of them met. 2 years later, when Sam decided to sell American Dream, the three guys pooled their money and bought the guitar shop, renaming it Westland Music Company. Quickly realizing Westland Music Company wouldn't really fit that well on the headstock of a guitar, they decided a name change was imminent. Taylor guitars sounded the most red, white, and blue compared to Listug guitars or Schemmer guitars, so they ran with that. Bobby T was the powerhouse behind making the guitars anyways. Kurt and Steve were more the behind-the-scenes and numbers dudes. By the 80s, their guitars were selling, but weren't quite the boom that was imagined by the trio. In 1981, Taylor Guitars took out a bank loan to purchase more equipment to modernize their operations. Between computerized mills, lasers, and other fancy proprietary hoodads, they became a global innovator and a leader in the guitar biz. Throughout the 90s, BT and the boys played around with different woods and luthier techniques, refining their craft and creating a few masterpieces along the way. 1999, they came up with the new technology neck. It differed from other guitar necks by using one continuous piece of wood all the way to the 19th fret, instead of the 14th as was the previous method. This required way less neck alignments as the guitar aged and added more stability. 2004, Taylor introduced their own pickup system called the Expression System. It consisted of a humbucking induction pickup, not to be confused with the humbucker pickup, mounted in the neck, and a pair of soundboard transducers. Transducers being just a fancy way to say microphones. All these goodies were wired into an onboard preamp designed by the legendary Rupert Neve. Neve consoles are top of the line and sell for almost $700,000 USD. Even just a channel strip from a Neve console goes for around $5,000. Entry-level model Taylor guitars, like I have, aren't quite as fancy in the pickup department and are equipped with an under-the-saddle pickup with no soundboard mics. By 2012, Taylor had expanded to European markets and had more than 700 employees between two factories. The original factory in El Cajon and a new one in my favorite place to play in Mexico, Tecate. The Tecate plant handled the manufacturing of guitar cases and lower-end guitar models. Taylor has 3 different numbering systems for their guitars over the years. The current 10-digit numbering system is what my guitar uses. The first digit tells you what plant it was made in, with 1 being the El Cajon plant in California, 2 being the Mexican plant in Tecate. The 2nd and 7th digits represent the year, 3rd and 4th being the month, 5th and 6th the day, and the last 3 digits represent the guitar's position in production. Now you know your guitar's birthday. They also had an 11-digit and 9-digit system, which were similar in terms of information. The first ever serial number was said to be 19, but records from that time aren't thought to be very accurate, so who really knows? Acoustic guitar sales have actually surpassed electric guitar sales as of recent, and Taylor boasts over $100 million in annual revenue. They pump out something around 700 guitars a day, or 130,000 guitars a year. A bunch of artists play Taylor guitars, some I kinda like, some I've kind of heard of. I myself still tour with my 2 Taylor guitars, the original 110E I bought in 2010, and a 114E that I bought just before my first solo tour with Fire Next Time in March 2011. If I had to pick a fave between my 2 Taylors, the 114 just feels better to play. The action is super low to the point that it kind of buzzes a bit on some frets and feels like the neck of my SG does. I think it sounds better than the 110E, although if you blindfolded me, I probably wouldn't be able to actually tell the difference. I must have the exact number of shows I've played with my Taylors written down somewhere, but I'm certain I've played over 1,000 shows with these guitars. They have fallen off the stage, have been in the back of a van for over 1 million miles, in minus 40-degree weather, hot dry conditions, hot sweaty conditions. They have flown over the Atlantic more than a dozen times. They've had to endure my playing night after night after night. If you look at my guitars up close, it's probably no surprise, I guess. They're pretty trashed. After all this abuse, however, they still play great. The only problem I've ever really had with them is the pickups. I'm quite the sweaty beast when I play, and all that sweat eventually corroded the pickup system, and it had to be replaced about 8 years after I bought both guitars. A guitar can be a very personal thing, an extension of your body at times. It's got to feel right and be something you will be stoked to play as long as you keep playing. Would I recommend Taylor to someone looking for a guitar? Sure. I mean, if the shoe fits, then run with it. Mine have lasted way longer than I ever thought they would. I've definitely got my money's worth, and in terms of quality, it's hard to argue they weren't built well. I'm not super into the latest and greatest guitars or really the latest and greatest anything. I usually just kind of find something I like and stick with it. I'm sure people have had horror stories of Taylor guitars and claim they suck and such, but I've had a great experience. Unless the quality has slipped in the last 10 years or something like that, they got a great thing going, and I hope that lasts. But don't take my word for it. Think for yourself and cut your own path through the forest of life. Just make sure at some point you grab a guitar on the way.